David, great to see you. A year since we last sat down together here at SuperReturn International.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me back. Go ahead.
Largest one ever, 5,000 people here. So this industry really want to get together and have a chat. Have the conversations moved on in the last 12 months since I last saw you?
This is the largest private equity conference in the world every year, so everybody shows up here. I've been coming for 20 plus years. I'll make a speech later today at the end of this conference about the elections in the United States. I did an interview earlier today of the head of InvestCorp, so it's a lot of activity here.
He said if you're not growing, you're going to be dead. Is that how you feel about this industry? And is it still doing that?
Well, if you're not moving forward, something bad will happen, so just keep moving forward. My own firm we have about 40 people here. So bringing 40 people from all over the world, not cheap, but it's worth it because we do meet a lot of people here. That's very helpful to us.
What sectors of interest are you most sort of interested in at the moment in terms of opportunity, and where do you see growth potential in quite a tricky landscape still?
Well, since last year, I think the greatest excitement in the investment world has been relating to artificial intelligence, which is now everybody's favorite topic, and so artificial intelligence is something people are talking about here. I think ESG is still very important to people. While it's been politicized and weaponized a bit in the United States, around the rest of the world, people are still very interested in ESG. I think people are also interested in the US elections. It's hard to believe how important it is to many people around the world. So almost everywhere I go, here people say, who's going to be the next president of the United States? And I can't say I really know, but it's amazing how influential that decision is. And people are talking about that all the time now.
Indeed, this year we've seen half the globe's population voting in democratic elections across the world. So it's been an amazing year for democracy. How does that affect the economic landscape?
Well, whenever there's a change in party in power, that obviously changes the economic construct of that particular country. So like there's going to be in England, there'll be an election on July the 4th, I think there will be. Elections just were held in India. Obviously, the United States has theirs in November. So a lot going on, and hopefully democracy will prevail.
What do you need to be doing to be able to navigate that sort of environment, and what sort of teams do you need to have at Carlyle and elsewhere?
You need to have people that have their nose to the ground so that they are not just looking at the spreadsheets, but they recognize that any investment will be impacted by the geopolitical and the political atmosphere in a particular country or other countries. So you have to have people that actually read things other than just spreadsheets.
And you talked about generative AI and what that can do. Do you think that's going to really be transformative in this industry?
AI will change every industry dramatically, so we're not going to be immune from that. Now, I don't know if there's going to be AI that will say, we don't need to have an investment committee anymore because we just plug it into the AI machine and it'll tell us whether we should do this deal or not. I hope that doesn't happen because that will unemploy a lot of people, right? But for the time being, I think people are still using their brain power themselves to figure out whether to do a deal or not do a deal.
It is a relationships business, that's what you've always said.
Everybody's here to make relationships. Everybody's here to kind of figure out who they can raise money from or who they can do a deal with. So that's why the conference is so well regarded, because it's well organized, well run, and everybody seems to show up.
You asked your colleague from InvestCorp, Mohammed Aladi, earlier, why would anyone want to be in private equity? Why choose this as a job? And he said, actually, it's because you can have an impact. Is that something you agree with? And is that a responsibility of people working in this industry?
Well, as I've said before, private equity is the highest calling of mankind. What could be more important? But aside from that higher calling, I do think people have a sense that they can make a real difference in this industry. An example I often cite is the man who was persistent in putting in private equity money into a company that nobody thought was going anywhere, and that company was Moderna, which when the vaccines were needed, Moderna showed up with one of the best vaccines. So private equity people there, by being persistent, by putting money into this company, they were able to actually develop a vaccine that helped the rest of the world. So private equity can do many great things, and I think that's just a classic example of it.
Should this industry be feeling that responsibility as well, arguably? Should they be actually seeking out that impact? Have they got a responsibility?
Well, I think private equity should try to get a good return for their investors, and it does. But when you're getting good return, you're actually producing good products, and good products and good services, and so it will help the world. I don't think you necessarily have to say impact investing is the only thing that helps the world. Impact investing might help the world in many ways, but if you produce a product like Moderna, which was not seen as impact investing, you can help the world that way as well.
Producing one of the most effective COVID vaccines because of private equity investment.
Yes, it was very persistent private equity investment in really venture capital, but the same concept, and that went on for 10 years. They had no product at Moderna for 10 years. That was approved by the FDA, but they were persistent. The private equity people kept putting money in, and ultimately it resulted in a very good vaccine.
How enjoyable is it for you to be at this conference every year? I know you've joked about coming until you can't walk here anymore. What do you get out of it, and why do you love it?
Well, I used to come here and people say I'm here representing Carlyle. Now people here say, well, you're here as the father of Gabrielle Rubenstein. My daughter's here. She's making speeches and she's overshadowing me, but that's okay.
We'd like to be overshadowed by our children, surely.
You can be overshadowed by your children. There are worse things than that, right?
Tell me about what she's doing. She's obviously found inspiration from you.
She has a healthy food fund, a private equity healthy food fund, and she does a lot of things on women's issues as well. So she moderated yesterday a panel of women in private equity, and she also meets a lot of prospective investors here.
How do you feel when you're watching her up on stage? How do you feel about the impact that you've had? Because she's obviously following in your footsteps to a certain extent.
I don't know if she's following my footsteps, but she's done pretty well, and I'm glad to see that she and my other two children are also in private equity. So maybe my greatest impact in the world is convincing my children to go into private equity.
Well, you did say it's the greatest calling to mankind.
I agree, and maybe they listen to me.
Just finally, you are going to talk about the elections on stage later. So
that's correct.
Are you going to give us any insight now as to what your prediction is later in the year?
I would say that whoever is elected will be the oldest person ever elected president of the United States. Either one will be the oldest person ever elected.
I think that's called hedging, isn't it?
Yes. So you have to come to the lecture to find out who's going to be president, but that's the only tip I'll give you right now, okay?
Always a pleasure, David. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you.